Hey, comic book fans. I am Pete, and I'm with my good friend Brian, and we are here to talk about two shows. We are Comic Books Transformed, and we like to talk about the media that has been adapted from our favorite comic books. So today, Brian, we got Ms. Marvel and the Boys. Can you think of two more different properties to talk about?
No, I can't. Um,
Yeah,
but I'm still very glad that both of these are going on at the same time because I think I would feel weird. Just actually, I think before I saw Miss Marvel, I would have felt weird just talking about Miss Marvel because we're
yeah.
two middle-aged white guys. So
Well, and then you showed me that there's another show for us middle-aged white guys to talk about. It's Paper Girls,
yes,
which that's actually one of my favorite comics. I love Paper Girls.
yeah, I love that comic too. I love plenty of Brian K. Vaughan stuff. Obviously, Why the Last Man saga. I still think they could pull off a saga show. I really think they can. I'm just
Yeah,
waiting for somebody to do it.
yeah. I mean, some of the stuff I've seen, I didn't watch that Halo show, and I know they have a Lord of the Rings show coming out, and they did Wheel of Time. Like, clearly, if
Well,
you could be a
Halo's
magic,
Paramount.
Paramount is what?
Halo is on Paramount, not Amazon. But I
Oh,
think,
I know. I'm just talking about like the capacity to make things like this.
yeah, I feel like Amazon is the right place to do it though, because The Boys is great, Invincible's great. You said Wheel of Time was good. I didn't watch it.
I only watched the first episode. It was pretty
Okay.
good. Yeah, yeah. But it's just yeah, that'd be a different kind of show. It's weird because like Brian K. Vaughan is he's contemporary to a lot of the comic book creators that we like, but he always kind of seems like separate. You know what I'm saying? Like his work always seems like it's away from everybody else. I guess because he's not really Marvel or DC at all anymore.
Well, yeah, I think all the stuff he's best known for now is all Image stuff and his own creator-owned stuff. So that's probably why.
Yeah.
I mean, he wrote he wrote what did he do in Marvel? Ultimate
Runaways.
Runaways, Ultimate X-Men too, for a little bit, right?
A little bit. Yeah.
Um,
I
I
think
don't know.
he's
I don't
done
know.
some other things too.
I don't know what he's
I
done
think
for
he did
DC.
DC. I don't know if he did any DC stuff.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. But I admire him because he's a bald man, and as you can see, I'm pretty much on my way there. The camera does a great job highlighting that for me. But for those of you that are at home, we're also streaming this on Twitch and also for podcasts. I mean, I guess you'd be at home too if you're watching this on YouTube, whatever. But Brian, we're up to episode 98 of our podcast.
Nice.
Yes. So let's talk about these two very different shows. We got Ms. Marvel episode 4, Seeing Red. So in my notes, I was saying to you that like Kamala doesn't really leave the country in the initial Ms. Marvel run. Like people might not know this with the comics, but like the way comic books work nowadays is that there's like long runs by like a specific creator. And when I say long, it might only be like a year or not even. Back in the day, used to be like you could have a creator on a book for like 5 years or more. But then once that creator leaves, they kind of reboot the comic and kind of start over again. And so G. Willow Wilson was the first Ms. Marvel writer. And I don't think that she took Kamala out of the country in that run. Do you remember anything like that in the
I
comic?
I don't I don't recall any stories where she left the country or particularly went to learn more about her roots. But I haven't read that much. Like my knowledge is from her appearances on Teen Books. So
Okay. Yeah, well, speaking of team books, she was on the Mighty Avengers and then she was on the Challengers. And I think that maybe with the Mighty Avengers, she left the country. But
I would imagine that. I mean, Avengers is more of a global scale kind of deal, but in the I mean, she is a teenager, in the comics, just like in the show. It kind of it's almost like kind of weird if it branches out into other countries, don't you think?
yeah, well, that's my whole point, man, is that like even with the Challengers, I think that they pretty much stayed in New York all the time. And I just always associate Ms. Marvel with Jersey City. And
Yeah.
so for them to like just be like, oh, we're going to Karachi now, all of a sudden, it just feels weird. And it kind of reminds me of Moon Knight. Do you feel the same way?
Yes, I think we all expected Moon Knight to kind of stay local because he is considered more of a street level hero. I mean, he does have these supernatural origins and all that, but there definitely seems to be a push to make these more globe-trotting adventures. Although I kind of feel like we're going to get back to Jersey City before the show is over, obviously.
Right. Me too. I personally would be totally okay if it was just Jersey City though, and they didn't go to another country, and that the villain, like maybe you don't really know what's going on with Kamala's origin. Maybe it's still mysterious during the first season, but that you have some kind of like localized villain. And I don't really want it to be Damage Control because I honestly think they're kind of lame in this series too. Like, would you have been content if they just stayed in Jersey City and had some kind of random villain?
I don't know. I'm torn with this because I think they're doing. I like what they're changing with her origin. I like that it's tied to history and to something else, and it's not just she's an Inhuman. And I appreciate all that, and I think that it might have needed it. But I mean, like you said, I'm used to. I associate her with Jersey City, and I think I might have liked some kind of more personal tale at the same time. But I don't know if that would have worked with explaining her powers and this new origin they've cooked up for her.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. Essentially, like the origin itself is like the whole arc.
Yeah,
you know, and usually like in a Marvel movie or even a Marvel show, you kind of have like the evil counterpart to the person. And I guess in this case, you do have like the evil Jinn people, which like the clandestine. Or what does it matter? Clandestine.
Clandestines. Yeah. They say it kind of a weird way almost, but
yeah. And so like they're the kind of the evil version of Kamala, or they're kind of like Kamala. But that's like the whole focus of this first series is just like figuring out where her power comes from. And so I am happy though that there isn't any kind of like random, let's shove some other MCU character in there, just like randomly, like, Falcon's here too, or look, here's Black Widow's sister. Like, I'm glad there's nothing like that.
So about that.
Oh no, come on.
I mean, haven't you noticed that every single episode they're cramming in something with Ant-Man?
Yeah. Oh no, is he going to show up?
I don't know. That's what I'm kind of thinking. I'm kind of thinking they're foreshadowing that.
Yeah. They mentioned like his podcast in the first episode. Then he was on that mural in this episode, right?
Yeah. No, it's been every episode. There's been some little nod to Ant-Man, including Carol Danvers too. But I don't think they could make it realistically believable that Carol could show up.
Yeah.
But I feel like maybe they could finagle Ant-Man being in Jersey City or something. I don't know.
What you know what though? You just kind of tickled my continuity boner because like I just was watching Endgame again recently, and it's the whole idea of the quantum realm, and that's kind of how they use time travel, right? So like go through the quantum realm. I know that like Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania is like down the road. Do you think that it's possible that to go through different dimensions, like to go from the newer dimension to this dimension, you have to go through the quantum realm?
That you may have struck some gold there, my friend.
Oh yes, quantum gold. I struck with my continuity boner. So we're good.
That got my continuity boner tingling.
Well, because it all kind of ties back, right? Because Kang is supposed to be in Ant-Man and the Wasp, right?
Yes, I mean even the color scheme of her powers feels very much like the color scheme they use for the quantum realm.
Yes, that's a really good point, dude. Do you think we're onto something there?
That would be kind of great, honestly. I mean, I feel like though every time we come up with this really cool idea that sounds really good, they just kind of like, no, it's the more common kind of obvious thing that you probably expect it to be, and not something really fucking cool like that.
Yeah, that's right. Not this kind of weird, convoluted comic thing. Yeah. I agree. It's usually more simplified. But like Quasar's bands, right, that he has, those are quantum power.
Quantum bands, yeah.
What the F, man?
I mean, that's what I was calling for in the beginning when I first saw that thing. So,
yeah.
I mean, and that also connects it sort of to Ms. Marvel as well. I mean, Captain Marvel, so. Yeah. Dude. Oh man, I hope that happens. We got 2 episodes, maybe we'll see something.
Man, my like continuity boner is just gonna go so flaccid in like 2 weeks. It's just gonna suck. So anyway, this is not a kid show tonight. Let's talk about. Oh, I'm glad my notes went to the top of my page where it's talking about Dune. Okay, that's good. All right, so all these characters, man. Every episode they like stick new characters in there. These like ancillary characters. Kamala's cousins. There's some random lady with like white hair that shows up at a dinner party this time. Do you think it's too much? Do you think they serve a purpose?
So I was thinking about that. I think that's just to kind of show familial structures in other cultures. I think there are larger families, there are more integrated families with they're with friends and all that. I think that's just showing part of the culture there. I think as middle-aged white dudes, I think we're kind of more used to a more centralized family structure. And I think it's just also I think the cousins actually have a decent use here in the sense that they're an excuse for Kamala to go running off in a strange country she's never been to on her own as a teenager. Because everybody thinks she's running around with them. So it's like, oh, they're a plot device, really, for as an excuse. So yeah, they're barely in it, but I think they served a decent enough purpose, to keep the plot moving.
I like that. And they also kind of help draw out that she's like a stranger in a strange land. Like, even though she is from this Pakistani culture, it's like a different world even for her, right? Yeah. Right, because you have that sequence on the beach where like she's eating some kind of food out of a bag, and she's like, "Oh, I never knew that there was this food in a bag." And because I guess at one point when I was watching it, I saw those cousins, and I saw them, her and the red dagger guy sitting on the beach, and with those people, and I'm like, "Wow, they just keep putting more people in the show, more characters." But when you say it like that, it makes a lot more sense.
See, it's funny too with that scene on the beach there. I'm like, oh, here's another little like dreamboat date sequence here for the teen girls show, which I thought was weird, but because they didn't take those characters anywhere, they're just kind of establishing a bond between the two characters, I suppose. And in the comics, they are related, right?
I believe so. Yeah,
they're cousins, I believe.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, and I think that the Red Dagger's origin and stuff in the comics is different from the way they're using them in this show, but I think it's working in this show.
Yeah, he's a standalone hero in the comics, but here it's like an order of two people. But yeah, no, it works. I think their overall motto or purpose is a little vague. We protect people from the unseen.
Right.
I mean, that's. I don't know. That felt a little underdeveloped, I think, but maybe they'll flesh that out at some other point.
Yeah, that's a pretty big umbrella to cover.
Yeah, it's very vague, and it's just like, oh, we protect people from the unseen. What? What does that mean?
Right. I mean, you could apply that to a lot of things, especially in the MCU. Like, I was trying to kind of clarify what exactly Khalid, that was like the mentor guy to Red Dagger, he was explaining the situation. Basically, he was saying that like there's an energy that blocks the Noor dimension from the what do you call it, the regular MCU, and that if you were to like break that barrier down, the Noor dimension would destroy the regular reality. And so I wonder if like the barrier itself, like if the quantum realm is kind of like, you know how like in DC they have the bleed?
Yep.
I wonder if that's kind of how they're going to use the quantum realm in Marvel, where it's like this thing that's in between realities.
Yeah, I think this is a good way to maybe tie it into the rumored larger arc of Phase 5. Is it Phase 5 or 4? I can't remember.
4.
4? Okay.
Yeah.
With Secret Wars and incursions, I mean that's kind of what it sounds like. There are these two worlds that are kind of overlapping in a sense, but not really. And there's a barrier between them, aka the quantum realm. And if they come together, one stays, one goes, kind of.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. That's interesting. If like what we're getting at, there is some validity to it, then it makes this all a lot more interesting. Because I was going to say that as they were establishing stuff in like Phase 2, right? And they're starting to allude to things in Phase 2. Was there ever a point where you felt like, oh, this is like too much, or it's like too much world building and I'm not engaged? Or were you always engaged in Phase 2, Phase 3?
Wow, that's a great question. So I mean, Phase 2 was just building up the Infinity Gems, right?
Right.
Um, yeah, I feel like they definitely used the Infinity Gems to bolster story characters and stories that may not have had like these like great established comic runs.
Good point.
But I mean, the Infinity Gauntlet storyline is so like legendary and memorable from when I was a kid that I think that might have held my interest just as much as if it would have been more standalone stories about the characters, just the characters themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I think that like with Phase 2, you do have movies that everyone kind of cites as like the duds or the problems. Like Thor: The Dark World is like the biggest example, right? And I think that that kind of feels like world building. Iron Man 2 feels like world building too, like that, where it's just like kind of like almost like filler, but it's like you have to include this one piece of information to put into the bigger story. And I'm wondering if like that's what these Phase 4 movies are feeling like to fans now, because there's definitely a decrease in excitement about Marvel. Like, wouldn't you say that overall it seems like Marvel's not necessarily at that peak that it was before?
Yeah, because I think that while these characters that they've made movies about, the most even the most successful ones, I think while they may not have had storylines that are widely known to other than like hardcore comic fans, you know, the names themselves were essentially household names prior. Like, you
Right.
know, if you would ask your grandmother, like, who's Captain America, they're like, oh yeah, I know Captain America, like, you know, even before the
Yes.
movies or something like that. But if you ask them like who Miss Marvel was, or Moon Knight, or even Captain Marvel,
Yeah.
they may not recognize those names. But like,
That's
you know, Cap, Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, maybe not Black Widow and Hawkeye, but at least those four, like, you know, they were household names, I would say, before the MCU.
very, very good point. And I think I kind of ask you like a variation on that question like every week, and you always give a good answer every week too. But yeah, like yeah, Doctor Strange might not necessarily be a household name, and of course Ant Man's probably not a household name, but now because of the MCU they
Yeah.
are. Yeah. But then like just kind of tying into that bigger story has made them household names, so that's pretty cool. I hope that this stuff all kind of pays off for Phase 4. I hope that Marvel keeps going and that it's just kind of like we think of Marvel the way we think of Marvel comics, where it's like we love Marvel and there might be comics that you and I don't like that much, but we're still going to buy comics from them every month. You know,
Yeah.
we're still
Um,
going to go see Marvel movies every year. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know if I want these movies to end, movies and shows to end or not.
Mm-hmm.
I would almost like them to have a finite end and say, okay, we're done now, rather than them to like totally fizzle out. You know,
Yeah.
like imagine that, you know, that they keep just digging deeper and deeper, and you know, we get like, I don't know, I almost said like a Sleepwalker show, but like I would actually want to see that.
Fuck yeah, I'd want to see that.
But like, yeah, but you know, the general public may not want to see that. So
Yeah.
um, I would almost rather. I'm torn between wanting a you know, to kind of go out on top rather than just to fizzle out, just to have more of them all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be kind of embarrassing doing like a live stream, being like, "Oh, Darkhawk, man, I can't wait for that next
Oh,
episode
I
of Dark."
want that too.
I know. Darkhawk's one of my favorites. I know. Yeah, I know. Dude, you bring up a really good point though. It's like it would be cool if it was finite and it ended. I just think they make so much fucking money, and so I don't think they will. Um, you know, it's funny because like Stranger Things right now, probably no one's like, who gives a shit about Ms. Marvel or the boys right now? Let's talk about Stranger Things because the finale just premiered like yesterday. I'm kind of avoiding social media as much as possible just because I feel like it's gonna be spoiler city. Um, but I mean, just to tie in with what you're saying, they pretty much were able to do a whole run of Stranger Things and no, like none of the main actors died or anything like that. They didn't have to replace people, and then they tell this finite story and it's done. I think honestly, it would be good to like maybe just let's have Marvel go to a Phase 5 and then end it, and that like maybe down the road bring back some movies or start it up again. But like, I like the idea of it being like a finite thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I always think back to Lost, the show Lost, as a cautionary tale. Like they had some great ideas in that show, and they had the world hooked, or America hooked on that.
Yeah.
But they kept pushing the envelope, and it got really convoluted, and they just had left the show off with a fairly unsatisfying ending. And I think that's putting it nicely.
Yeah.
Um, so I just I always prefer when something is started and they have an idea of how it's going to end and they execute it, as best they can with the amount of time they're given with it. But just it's not a sitcom. They could just perpetually go on writing random storylines, that fit the characters. Like these are continuations of stories, and they do need to have an ending. And I'd rather have a good ending than just going on for the sake of going on because it makes money.
Yeah, and you know what? Like Thor, it seemed like all for the main Avengers, there was like a trilogy for each of the main Avengers: Iron Man, Captain America, Thor. Now there's the fourth one coming out pretty soon. I've actually kind of heard some people saying bad things about this one. Have you heard anything?
Oh,
like
I have not actually. I've heard it's a mighty good time. That's about as far as I've gotten into reading about it. So
yeah. It's weird. It's just like social media, just in general. I mean, it doesn't help that the whole world is just going to fucking hell in a handbasket. But like, just the polarized views. Some people just like love the MCU and they like talk about how Ms. Marvel is great. Then there's other people that are just like, this is the worst. And some people are like, oh, I love all the Marvel movies, and some people are like, I like maybe 4 of them. It's so funny how polarized it is. And I think like with the show like Ms. Marvel, I could absolutely see why like white fanboy guys like us, they would be like, oh, this isn't for us, because it just seems very different from everything else.
Well, here's a view on it that's going to flip this conversation on its head. Is that maybe it's because the average white male comic book fan isn't seeing any representation of his self in the show, and they're not interested, which is really what all this diversity is about for other cultures. All they're seeing is white people, and they're not white people, so they want to see themselves represented here. So I think that's a reason for these kind of shows to exist, even though we may not be the exact target audience.
Very good point. Yeah, because I think like Bruno essentially is like the only kind of white male on the show, right? And then was he even in this episode? I don't think so, right? They were just pretty much in Karachi the whole time. Yeah. Wow. Well, all right. So then just to kind of get through to the end of this episode, we have the clandestine escape from the prison, the Supermax prison, which was like a damage control prison, which is interesting. I don't really think damage control was like that in the comics, right?
I don't think so either. I guess it's just kind of keeping it all in house, so they don't have to explain why like Shield's not involved. Well, Shield doesn't exist anymore, but
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
it was after Shield we had Hammer in the comics. I mean, and that we haven't had any replacement for Shield really. So
right.
I guess it sort of makes sense in a okay enough way.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah. I wonder how many times I say very good point in one episode for you. A lot. So they escape. They leave Kamran back in the prison, and then they go to Karachi, and then there's this big chase sequence, which is a very colorful kind of chase sequence, and Kamala got to use her powers. That was kind of fun. Did you pretty much think that Waleed was going to get killed in that chase sequence?
100%.
Yeah.
No doubt whatsoever. But although I didn't think like he got stabbed in like the shoulder. I mean, that seems a little non-life threatening to me. But
I guess it depends on how long her blades are, right? Because that could go down to his heart, I guess.
Maybe. Yeah, I guess that did look like a decently sized knife. So it's possible.
Did she have knives, or did she have like side blades like Elektra?
I think it was her clandestine weapon that she like manifests. Okay. I couldn't quite exactly tell, but it's definitely more than just like a regular knife.
Okay. Yeah, I knew that guy was going to die, and then I was not expecting like the cliffhanger ending of essentially like Kamala like going back to the partition times.
Yeah.
And my question to you, and I put this in the notes, was do you think that she's literally back in time, that it made her travel back in time, or is it like a case like where she's like in a memory and she's just sort of there?
100% travel back in time. She's the reason her grandmother found her father. She made the stars. 100%.
Okay.
There's no doubt in my mind about that.
All right. Well, never mind. Okay. So don't you think that actually gives like some validity to our quantum realm theory?
Yeah.
Because
time travel. Yeah.
Time travel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. That's interesting. And then like that even just to kind of get like Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and have that big poster board behind me and look all crazy. Right. Because I mean, like time travel like that, you couldn't do pre-Loki, right? Because there was the TVA.
Yes.
And you couldn't like change time like that. But now, since the TVA has been destroyed or whatever, and they've made all the convergences or whatever they call it, variations, now you can do that.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what's happening here is she's, this, or this could be one of those instances where it was always meant to happen. Because just like the time travel in Endgame. So, she's kind of like closing the loop essentially on her own time travel by being the one that was there that created the stars that her grandmother followed to find her father.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. This conversation has actually made me a lot more excited about this show than I was. So thank you.
Yeah. I enjoy this episode. I've been enjoying the show. I mean, I definitely can see why people wouldn't be interested. It does seem it does still kind of like Moon Knight feels like a little unconnected, but maybe a little bit more potentially. So I'm still excited to watch the rest of the episodes, which I guess there's 2 more.
Correct. Yeah. I do feel like there's going to be moments in upcoming movies and stuff where all of a sudden Ms. Marvel, I mean, I know Ms. Marvel is going to be in the Marvels. I feel like Moon Knight is going to be relevant in a movie somehow, like the Egyptian gods or something. I feel like there is, even though they feel kind of disconnected, that it's going to be like, oh, we're getting rewarded for watching these Disney Plus shows.
Yeah, I think that's the whole MO of these shows is to, keep you hooked and to fill gaps in time between movies and just to build up the events without the larger named established characters.
Yeah. And the very next one is She-Hulk, right after Ms. Marvel?
That's correct.
Okay, nice. Okay, cool. All right, well, then let us jump over to the other show, The Boys. We're up to season 3, episode 7. Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Have you ever heard that line before?
I have not actually. So that your notes there were very informative.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd never heard of it either, and then I just looked it up. It was a simple Google search, and like basically it's from like a British poem, right? And they don't really know the origin of the poem itself, but they think that maybe it was said like before people were executed. Maybe like one of those little like London bridges falling down kind of thing. But the whole line goes, here comes a candle to light your bed, and here comes a chopper to chop off your head. So I was trying to think of like the context, like why did they pick this particular line for this episode? Do you have any theories?
I mean, it being that it's British, I'm assuming it's tied to Butcher and his what happened with his brother. I guess he thought he was, he felt he needed to take care of his brother, and then he ended up really just imitating what his father was, continuing the cycle, and him leaving, which was kind of called for the suicide of his brother, which would be the execution in this sense.
Yeah. I'd have to agree with you on that one too. I think it's like we all as an audience know what's coming. We know his brother dies. And so it is kind of like the executioner's coming, even though he took his own life. But you could say that maybe Butcher killed him by leaving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you feel about this show? I mean, the comics to me really felt like it was about Butcher and Huey.
Yeah.
And as you know, the main characters with Homelander being like the central villain. Um, do you feel that ever in this show that Butcher sometimes feels like a side character in his own
A,
show?
1,000% yes. A
I
thousand
mean,
percent yes.
his storyline in this episode was very weighty, very heavy, but
Yeah.
still, like they've done such a fantastic job of fleshing out every single character that everything has some kind of meaning or twist or involvement in the overall plot, with maybe the exception in this episode of The Deep, which I think maybe they're taking a little bit too far now.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if that pans out to something that ties in elsewhere.
The deep stuff?
Yeah, yeah, because it's just exaggerating the joke that Aquaman fucks fish.
Uh,
So it's like, do they need to drive that home 3 episodes in a row or whatever, or would that be like the whole plot line of him? Or like I feel like before there was some kind of larger connection with his wife and manipulating him or directing him or whatever, but it seems like it's a lot more casual after this episode, don't you think?
I agree that yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't even really want to dig into that. I just kind of wanted to point out how ridiculous that was. However, there is kind of like a pattern to it. It's like, he goes to Herogasm because he's been tasked with being in charge of this task force, right? That is Vought run this like crime task force, and he like fired like the whole team. And his wife has been essentially like guiding him. And I think that like one of the major themes of the show, just like the major theme of the comic, is that like superheroes would just be like perverted, delinquent whack jobs, and he's like the best example, if not Homelander. And I think that like it's going to lead to a downfall. I don't know if of Vought, but maybe just him like having his wife leave.
Oh, and he's so inept at everything that he's going to screw something up and to cause some problem for Vought. That
right.
is, yeah, okay, there we go.
Yeah, I think that like with good writing like this show has, there's always sort of like two birds with one stone for different scenes. And so you might have a scene that adds a lot of humor and it's just it makes the people talk about it at the water cooler the next day. And that's what a guy having a threesome with his wife and an octopus is, right? It's just like, the show's so ridiculous.
I don't know what workplace I feel comfortable talking to that with.
Yes, thank God we like work from home and like are on summer break and stuff, right? They don't want to be talking about this fucking show. But going with the Deep, Deep is like A Train, where there's the members of the Seven that they always kind of have their own little side stories, and it doesn't always seem like it's directly connected to the main story. A Train. For A Train this episode, I thought this was actually my favorite scene in the whole episode because it was like one of those moments where I was like, oh fuck, I didn't even think of that. That's
this is like some Twilight Zone kind of stuff,
Yes, such a good twist. Like essentially, it was the guy's name's Blue Falcon, right?
No, Blue Falcon is from like Scooby Doo and Hanna-Barbera. Blue Hawk.
That's the second fucking time you've corrected me too, I think. Jesus. All right. Well, what's the guy's name? Blue Hawk.
Blue Hawk. Yes.
Okay.
Totally. Like you've always gotten the color right, and it was a bird, but
yes. Yeah. And well, this guy's way more racist than the Scooby Doo version.
Yes.
And he's dead. He's a fucking skid mark in like New Jersey or something. But A Train is alive because they gave him a heart transplant. That is just so fucking crazy. I love that.
Yeah, that was a great, Twilight Zone, Black Mirror-esque twist to throw A Train through, and I wonder how that's gonna affect his character and where he positions himself on the sides of Vought and Homelander or the boys in the future.
Yeah, and it's so like poetic and stuff too, because he could have had this like noble death essentially, and he's killing this racist guy that represents like the worst part of his career, his personality, and it's like that guy's heart gives him more life. I just think it's so poetic and awesome, and like his interaction with I always forget her name, the assistant lady.
Oh, Oh my god, I forgot it.
She said she's like
Ashley.
Ashley. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just the fact of like, oh well, we're gonna retell your origin story, and you're gonna have a movie, and it's gonna be directed by this director, and we're gonna play with this angle, and the way that they're like manipulating his story, that kind of stuff is always so dark and so scary. But it's like, man, this must be fucking true too. It's just like, Hollywood comes in and changes the details to kind of serve an agenda, and like changes what actually really happens. I think that's so scary.
Yeah, especially in this context too. It's like, oh, maybe we'll get someone like Tom Hanks. It's like, my brother trained me.
Right,
like,
right.
Yeah, it's Hollywood whitewashing at play here.
Yes, yes. I mean, that's the thing about this show, and it kind of puts us in a precarious spot talking about the show too, because I don't like to necessarily get political when I'm talking about comic books and stuff, but this show is so very political. Like everything is like, hey, this is a mirror to what our world is like, and you can't avoid it. Whether it's like, Starlight in the very beginning, Ashley is denouncing Starlight. She's talking about like, oh well, Starlight's actually a criminal, and we can't believe what she's saying. Fake news. And they kind of almost like connect her to that Hillary Clinton like conspiracy where she's like involved in sex trafficking, and there's something going on with like kids in a pizzeria. They kind of connect that to Starlight. It's crazy.
It's incredible how much they've taken from real life in this, like,
yes,
and made it work in this narrative in a different light. It's almost it's kind of scary, honestly, that these are all kind of based on real things,
right?
Really happen, and and normally a show like this is like an escape or something, or just just seeing something different, and it's kind of like showing you, oh no, the world is kind of like this. It's not with superheroes with powers. But people are just as evil.
Yes, like someone made a point once to say that the people in ancient Greece didn't like truly believe in like Zeus, and like they thought of them the way that we kind of think of like Zeus and the Greek pantheon. And it's interesting because like if our society does collapse, which it seems kind of closer and closer every single day, this show would be such an artifact, right? Because it's like we're so obsessed with superheroes, and the superheroes kind of mirror our real world. It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about. Let's just go through all the touchy stuff then too. So then, we'll bring up Black Noir and his fucking tragic story.
Yes, which I love the contrast of the cartoon characters he's seeing in his head to describe this horrific scene that happened. It helps give us a lot of context too for why they. For what happened to Soldier Boy and how he got to Russia, although not necessarily exactly why yet. I'm wondering if they have something yet to reveal here. The big thing to take out of this was the end cliffhanger with the conversation between Soldier Boy and Homelander, that Soldier Boy is Homelander's father. So the idea that of how he got sent off to Russia it exists here, and they thought Stan Edgar and Vought thought they had someone to replace him, but the exact reason why, I mean, did he just get too big for himself? I mean, they're implying that he essentially started superhero culture, like he was the forefather of that, and was he just getting too big for his britches, and they wanted to take him down a notch and remove him, and they had a replacement already to fill the gap. Or there's something else there that we haven't learned yet, because this is completely not from the comics. Soldier Boy was not related to Homelander at all.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
No. Soldier Boy was I said this in the past. He's a legacy hero. There have been at least 3 different Soldier Boys, if I remember correctly, and the scene where the flashback scene where in what country was that?
Russia.
It was something in South America, wherever they were. I can't remember.
Oh, Nicaragua.
Nicaragua. In that scene, the battle they were mirroring from the comics, he dies in the comics there. That version dies in that scene. So, and the current Soldier Boy, who is, you know, part of Payback. They're still a team. They're still together, and they're a much lesser version of the Seven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So okay. Well, that was one of my questions in the notes. Was is the one of the versions of Soldier Boy the father of Homelander? But okay, I'm glad you clarified that for me. I think it might be another like kill two birds with one stone type thing. I do think that you're like too big for his britches theory that you said is probably the case. But I think that maybe they also were trying to figure out a way to kill Soups, and that's why they gave him to the Russians like that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the Russians were just supposed to kill him and they kidnapped him instead. I don't know either. They probably will clarify that.
It's possible that Soldier Boy was just used for testing to produce a different version of the Compound V, or maybe the temporary V or something like that. Because the comics, the arc when they go to Russia with Little Nina, the whole thing is that Vought gave them stuff to, they gave them V and stuff to experiment on prisoners to just see what would happen, essentially, to further their ultimate goal of getting superhero, soldiers infused with V in the military. That's the ultimate goal of Vought.
Right. So yeah. And that's where they seem to be going at the beginning of this season, but then like Homelander kind of took over. And I know there's still stuff going on with Newman, and I know that you said that Newman is very different from the way that he is in the comics. Newman is a guy in the comics, but I actually couldn't really remember that interaction between Homelander and Newman in this past episode. Like, I know that they were basically saying like, we need each other, but what was her angle? Do you remember?
Well, they don't ever say what it is, but I think I know what it is. So she needs a small favor from him, and then he said she would basically help him. And I think that favor is getting her the vice president nomination.
Okay.
They dropped that little notice about the other guy standing with Robert Singer saying like, oh, maybe you're going to be announced as the vice president, the president's running mate, and he kind of dodges the question. So I think they planted that, and that makes a lot of sense to me. That because Homelander, although it's kind of weird that Homelander was at a rally for this president, because the president in the comics, Dakota Bob, he seemed to be more Democratic. More of a Democrat than a Republican, so it seems kind of a little mixed there. But maybe I read it wrong. I'm not sure. But I absolutely think that we're going to see, in the last episode, Newman be announced as Bob Singer's running mate.
Okay, cool. That's interesting. I'm glad you clarified that for me. Yeah, I'm just trying to think like where this is going ultimately. Do you think that Soldier Boy and Homelander are now gonna like join forces? Because there's only one episode left, right?
Yeah, there's only one episode left. So this is where I'm torn here, because this was all revealed to us in the very end of the episode, and the way we perceived it is that we didn't hear what Mindstorm said to Soldier Boy. We assumed that he told. I mean, we pretty much know that he said that Homelander's your son.
Yeah.
Now, what we don't see is, after Butcher gets off the phone with Starlight, we don't really see them interact with Soldier Boy at all. But we see Soldier Boy call Homelander.
Right.
I'm wondering if that is legitimate, if that is, really what's going to happen, that they're going to team up, or they're all in on it, and that's just a way to lure Homelander out.
Okay. I did kind of have that thought too. I didn't think of it as like bait in that moment, but I thought of like, well, what if it still is that he wants to still kill him? Yeah. Okay. That would be cool. I would like that twist. I guess I don't really want you to spoil what happens in the comics for me, but is the show just supposed to be one more season after this, or?
I don't know. I mean, there was like 70 something issues, I think, in the comic run, including like side stories and stuff. So, or is it more than that? Because I have like 6 omnibus.
It's a lot.
Yeah, so that's probably more than that.
Well, they did make a point to say that, like, because Homelander, I think, says at one point, that some soups were killed, but then some were depowered too. So I think they really want to play up that depowered thing.
Yeah.
And so I do think that because you were kind of implying that Homelander maybe, and spoilers for people, dies earlier than the whole comic ends.
Yeah.
And so maybe one way they kind of write around that is they just depower him in this. And then like there's an arc where he's just a regular person. And that would give like Anthony Starr some interesting material to work with, because he's so great on the show. I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll see what happens, but I mean, this show is just so fucking good. And you said that like you'd watched The Boys before watching Ms. Marvel, and like The Boys, it's like it's hard to beat it right now, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm enjoying Ms. Marvel. I do like it, but this is like the equivalent of like when Peacemaker was on. Like nothing was as good as that. And I mean, to me, those are the two best shows of the year. Along, I guess, I mean, I haven't finished Stranger Things yet, but I'm assuming that's going to be up there too because I've really enjoyed that so far, or at least large parts of it.
Yeah. Well, so and do you have anything else that you want to say about?
We didn't cover. Oh yeah, I did. I really wanted to dive into something with Maeve actually.
Please, yes.
Seeing with Homelander and Maeve, I love because I feel like in comics, a lot of the times there's just not like illogical reasons that heroes are kept alive and whatever, and it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
They took Maeve off the board, but they kept her alive, and the reasoning for it makes total sense with the plot, and I love that.
Right.
Because any other reason, they should have just killed her.
Right.
Homelander's reasoning of harvesting her eggs to make super babies, just genius way to keep her alive and on the board, rather than just thinking up some bullshit reason that they didn't kill her. Totally fantastic.
Yes.
We talked about Butcher and we got to go into Butcher and Huey a little bit. Obviously, Starlight finds out that the temporary V is fatal, which with 3 to 5 uses. So I believe Butcher is on his 5th, and Huey is on his 3rd or 4th.
Oh wow!
Oh no, Butcher's on 1 more. So it's Huey's on 3 and he's on 4. I think at the very least, because Butcher used it against the bullet. What the hell's the bullet guy? The sidekick.
Oh, gun smoke or gun?
No. I can't remember. God damn it.
Yeah, I know which guy you're talking about, though.
Butcher used it against the Bucky analogy.
Right.
Then they both used it in Russia. They both used it at Herogasm, and they both used it. Oh, wait a minute. Did they both use it with Crimson Countess? They did, because he used the power. Did he use the powers then?
I think they did charge up. Yeah, because Soldier Boy's just like radiating. He's giving off radiation, right? So they kind of need to be super powered, right?
Yeah, and they used it now for the battle for when they were hunting for Mindstorm. So it's either 3 and 4 or 4 and 5 for both of them there. And even with all the guilt we saw Butcher go through with reliving his past trauma with his brother and how he sees Huey as like a second chance at having a little brother and doing something right, he's still putting him in harm's way to get the job done.
Oh yeah, of course.
And just personifies the bastard that he is.
Yes. That type of character is pretty common in comics, but it tends to be like one of my favorite types. Like that's definitely John Constantine to a T, or Constantine, right?
Yes.
However you want to fucking pronounce him. That sort of like that means to an ends person will use people and like loved ones. You think they're safe, but they'll still use them because they need to meet their goal. I actually love that kind of character and that kind of a dynamic in a story. It pretty much always ends tragically for them. I'm pretty sure it'll end tragically for him too.
Yeah.
It's so funny because you mentioned at the very beginning of this episode that he kind of seems like a secondary character in his own show, which the comic is like mainly about him and Huey. But his stuff always seems like so much more intense and dark than so many of the other characters' stories. You know.
Yeah. And there are several times where the boys kind of go their separate ways. Even in the show already, they've done it so many times that after all this, whatever resolution happens here, like I can't imagine what's going to keep them together in the future.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And then we've kind of touched on this before, but with they furthered the plot of the stepdad, being a Homelander fan and bringing the daughter to the rally.
Yeah.
And I think we'd all agree that we want to punch that guy in the face, but it definitely did some damage to his relationship with his daughter, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was satisfying though when he did punch that guy. And I mean, once again, this is kind of just going back to that whole mirror up to current society. It's like taking a kid to a Trump rally, and it's like, oh my God, this is the guy that's now with my wife is bringing my kid to that, and he knows firsthand just what Homelander is capable of and what he's done.
Yeah,
and that kind of ties in with what's that?
And he can't really say it.
Yeah, yeah. And that ties in with, one other point that I wanted to make too was that Homelander confronts Starlight and he says this kind of threatening stuff, which we've seen him do like, I don't know, hundreds of times on the show. And then she actually got it on tape though and like streamed it live. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how that's going to get spun and if it will break through with that guy. I think his name's Todd. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I mean, it's going to keep mirroring reality.
Yeah,
this not.
right, exactly. That's the fucking scariest thing about the world we live in is that you could literally have a character like Homeland being like, "I'm gonna kill this person," and then people will be like, "Well, maybe they should die," and it's like, "Oh my God, heaven."
Yeah. And then the final plot line we didn't talk about was Kimiko and Frenchie, where essentially Kimiko makes the decision to get her powers back, and she has Starlight for help. So she can protect her family. I think that's a nice storyline there, and a nice sentiment to have. Although it does look like they have some extra V left over. So I'm kind of curious if anybody else uses it.
Yeah. There was a little bit more of the blue permanent stuff. Yeah, I know. So maybe it could be, Butcher or Huey.
I mean, I'm my first guess is going to be Frenchie. Because he's going to also want to help protect her with that same family mentality. It could be Butcher as well. Maybe giving them the permanent V will help correct whatever is killing them from using the temporary V.
Right.
And then that would leave being the only one that probably wouldn't have it. Although he didn't have it from V, he didn't have his powers from V in the comics anyway. So, well, not directly anyway.
Yeah, I did read that like he had it like as a secondary thing. It was almost like Blade's origin in the comics,
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we had mentioned before was how like this show is just so good and it's kind of like a step above. And you mentioned Peacemaker. I think that like these comic book shows, they have a certain vibe based on which universe they're set in. And so the MCU shows all feel like a certain way. The CW shows felt a certain way. I'm watching Umbrella Academy now so that we can talk about it eventually. And that's kind of giving me a little bit of like CW vibes too. A little bit. But it's its own thing too. And that kind of reminded me of like Jupiter's Legacy a little bit too. I guess because maybe they're both by Netflix. But The Boys is its own thing, and I think that Peacemaker pretty much was its own thing too, even though it was set in that sort of DC cinematic universe. But it's so good, and I think it's a great example. I always think like, why do you need to go R with superheroes? Why do you need to do this? It's like, why are they always pushing for that? But The Boys is a great example of how it works.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's easier to get some of these points across when you can see the potential of destruction of what these people have.
Yes.
Like you don't often see people getting smashed in like a Superman comic, but that probably is what would happen if someone with the strength of Superman would hit somebody.
Right. Just turn into sloppy joes. Yeah. All right. Well, that's pretty much it for The Boys and Ms. Marvel for this week. Brian and I will cover both these shows next week again and have them up by the weekend. And then the following week, we're going to do the finale of Ms. Marvel, and we will be talking about Thor: Love and Thunder. So we got
that'll be the 100th episode then. The Ms. Marvel finale and Thor. There you go.
That's fucking perfect. That's awesome, man.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, if you guys have not liked and subscribed, please do. And we will see you guys next week.